Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bottom Line podcast on the Blood Red channel with myself, Patrick Smith. And this is the place to be to get all the latest news on Liverpool's finances and, of course, FSG's new search for investors or potentially new owners. Well, joining me, of course, to talk through all of this is the Liverpool Echo's business of football writer and all-round Liverpool FC financial expert, Dave Powell. Dave, thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much, Pat. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you back on. Well, we've got plenty to get into, obviously, regarding FSG's potential sale of Liverpool, the UAE mid-season tour, I'm going to call it, obviously while the Reds are at the Qatar World Cup. But I'm going to get into it, Dave, with a general overview of the ownership. I mean, what are the latest development this week in FSG's search for new investors or potential new owners?
Well, with every day that passes, there seems to be another name linked, another billionaire from another part of the globe. But as things stand, from what I'm told from US sources, first and foremost, is that there's no rush for FSG or John Henry to part company with Liverpool. They have a valuation in their mind, and if someone reaches that number, then they may get through the door to talk, and that's when kind of discussions will start. Really, obviously, Mike Gordon has in the past week. I mean, I'm quite tellingly, really. I mean, he's started to step back from his day-to-day role with Liverpool. That transition's already started. Billy Hogan will assume more responsibility as the Liverpool CEO, and Gordon's role will be to kind of sift through the opportunities that may lie in wait for FSG around Liverpool. So whether that is interested bidders will come to Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, then that will come through. Any ones which are genuine and bona fide, they'll be presented to Mike Gordon to sift through, and then ultimately presented to FSG as an option. But as things stand, there's no one who's got to that point. There's plenty of shown an interest. From what I understand in the U and people well placed in the US have kind of corroborated this, there is interest from Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. They're mulling their options. They've not made any, from what I can gather, they've not made any concrete decision on what they're going to do. They are looking at Liverpool as an option because they were in the bidding process, as were many of the people linked with Liverpool, with the Liverpool purchase in the past week or so, with the Chelsea bid early on this year. So the people that didn't get into the market with Chelsea before Todd Boehly acquired it, you can imagine will have an element of interest in what happens with Liverpool, because there is a real scarcity value. I say it all the time, but attached to these Premier League sides in the Big Six, they don't come up very often, and when they do come up, they generate an enormous amount of interest, because the view from the US particularly is that team valuations are going to carry on rising for the foreseeable future. They will plateau eventually and maybe decline, but for the time being, they are predicted to carry on rising. Media rights are going to continue to rise. There will be new revenue streams coming online as new technologies are adopted. The US ownership looks at it as the Premier League's heavily under-monetized. And so in the US, for example, teams are purchased, well, in this country, are purchased on a multiple of revenue. So I think Chelsea's, when they were bought by Boehly, was about 5 times or 6 times a multiple of revenue, 5, I think. And you look at the NFL, the sale of the Denver Broncos, I think, was done at a multiple of about 9. So that shows where they see the value. But in terms of interest, Harris Blitzer, they've already got a sporting portfolio. They own the Philadelphia 76ers NBA team, the New Jersey Devils NHL team. Josh Harris and David Blitzer both own 18% each of Crystal Palace. Now, I was in New York last month, and at the Sportico Invest in Sport conference, and David Blitzer was a speaker there, and he was pressed on his decision to enter that race for Chelsea, despite being a shareholder in Crystal Palace. And I thought that the response he gave was quite telling, because he said, well, it was an opportunity which we presented itself, and one we felt we had to pursue, in relation to the fact it's a Big Six club in the Premier League. There is they don't come up very often. They are one of the only English football assets which are kind of guaranteed not to go down, which feeds into kind of the Americanization that kind of some US owners crave, which kind of lends itself. Do you think that would probably form part of the thinking for Liverpool? Also, part of their bid for Chelsea was Sir Martin Broughton, who was Liverpool chairman in the early months of FSG's tenure. He was quite important to that transition period from Hicks and Gillett to the early part of FSG's reign, seen as a very important figure. Now, the person that placed him in with FSG and who thought he would be a good fit for that was a guy called Michael Klein, Wall Street financier, with links to FSG, and he was someone who was key in that takeover. That transition of power from Hicks and Gillett to FSG in the first place. He's part of that group as well, and also HBSC, so Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. They have a long-standing partnership with a institutional investor called Arctos, who are minority partners in FSG. They invest in multiple sports teams across the globe, mainly in the North American sports market. But so there are a lot of kind of simpatico relationships and links that you can find with this group, and that lends itself to the fact that they are considering their options with this. But ultimately, I've also been told that it is doubtful that they become the eventual owners of Liverpool Football Club, largely because there is no bargain price to be had at Liverpool like there was with Chelsea. So $2.5 billion was seen by some as paying over the odds, but there's an element of LIFO involved in team ownership. So it's the kind of last in, first out. So the price of the team that goes before usually sets the benchmark for what comes next. And with valuations and sale prices continuing to rise, that rings true. So I think that I'm told the price tag of around $4 billion is kind of in the ballpark of what FSG would even consider to get in the door. So that would by far and away be a huge chunk of their empire, if they were to press ahead with that. And I'm not too sure whether there is that ability to do that and really energize it in the way that maybe or spend the money in the way that kind of Burley and Clearlake Capital have at Chelsea. But that they may find more to add to the group who can bring the capital required to make a difference. But as it stands, I think they have an interest. They haven't acted upon that interest. It's just an interest, but I'm also told that it would be unlikely that they would be a winning bidder. But that's to say, that's not to say the landscape with them could change. They could bring new parties to the table. But that's the way that particular bid stands at the moment.
I mean, yeah, you sort of touched on the next question there about Harris Blitz. I mean, they were obviously pretty happy to sell up their 18% stake in Palace to go for the Chelsea bid, which they didn't go through with. Do you think they're not serious contenders then in this case for Liverpool in any shape or form?
I think in terms of they're very astute. They've got a great portfolio. Their history as sports manager. One thing is interesting is the fact that David Blitzer has his own investment vehicle called Global Football Holdings, which owns. They recently took over Brøndby in Denmark. They own ownership stakes in ADO Den Haag in Holland, a team called Alcorcon in Spain, and also Augsburg in Germany. So it kind of lends itself again to the type of thing that Chelsea may be trying to do. So they talked about it, multi-club ownership, which is, but for that to work like it has done at City or Red Bull or wherever, you need a kind of a figurehead or a beachhead that acts as the football club which all these teams sit under, and they haven't really got that at the moment. Brøndby certainly isn't big enough to achieve that through what they're doing. However, Liverpool certainly would be, but it's the cost involved to make that happen. So I do think they'll look at it with the idea of could this be how we can adopt a multi-club model, but they wouldn't be buying it on the cheap if they did. So there's no, I don't think there's any cheap deal to be brokered here. Again, it's whether or not they bring other people to the table with the capital that might be able to help them realise that. But at the moment, I think it's just interest that they have exploring the options. They've not, I don't think they've gone in any direction of travel any way down the line with Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley. So I think that from what I'm told, it's just interest at this moment in time. But again, other people tell me that it would be an unlikely scenario if they did. But it's not to say it'd be ruled out completely.
Do you think a project like that, like City Group have done with Man City, obviously, and you mentioned Red Bull, do you think that could be something Liverpool look to do with this sale, or would they look to steer clear and just remain as the singular club?
I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to say that. I mean, I don't. It used to be on the agenda for FSG in a fairly considerable way, but since then, I think they have kind of pivoted slightly, and they're looking back towards North America. Because largely, I think, because they haven't been able to implement the kind of structural change within leagues. I mean, the failure of Project Big Picture was a bigger failure, I feel personally, for John Henry than any failure of the Super League was. I think Project Big Picture is probably more important. You know, that allowed them to change some elements of governance around the Premier League and and Liverpool's rights. But I think they will sell to. I don't think having a multi-club strategy will be something which they, it forms a major part of the thinking when selling. I mean, I think FSG would like to. I know they'd like to add an NBA team, and it'll be in Vegas when they do it. It'll be a couple of years away. There's been NFL mentioned. I mean, John Henry could invest into the NFL as an individual if he wanted, but he can't. FSG can't buy, as the rule stands, an NFL team. So it's nonsense to suggest it, because the NFL doesn't allow private equity, and Liverpool have at least three partners, private equity partners. They got Redbird, Arctos, who I mentioned just before, and Kaz Investments. So Henry could do it by himself with Tom Werner if he wanted, but I mean, FSG couldn't add to that portfolio until those rules change. So, but they'll sell to who meets their valuation, if anyone does, and also I think they will probably lean towards a US market purely because they will want to leave it in the hands of someone they think is will be a good custodian of the football club and probably chimes morally with what the city of Liverpool is all about. So I think maybe that rules out some sovereign wealth funds. But again, you can never second guess these things, never say never, because these things, if someone comes to the table with a huge offer, you can't second guess what someone's going to think. This is all just personal, it's all personal opinion, isn't it? But from what I'm told, that's the kind of the sense I'm getting.
Yeah, I seem to remember it's all personal opinion and rumours at the moment, and there seems to be a new rumour or link every 4, 5, 6 days. Well, on that, let's turn our attention then away from those rumours to the United Arab Emirates. Liverpool are going to spend their mid-season training camp, if you will, during the World Cup there. Dave, it was announced yesterday that Liverpool will play 2 friendlies against AC Milan and Lyon. I mean, they're involved in this tournament that's got 3 clubs sponsored by Emirates. It's obviously in the UAE. There were some pretty vague rumours a couple of weeks ago linking the Dubai Crown Prince to Liverpool. Do you think there's any business to be done there at all, or is it strictly a coincidence that they're
there? I think it's a warm weather training camp in an area which is, presents commercial opportunity. Well, I mean, there's some big teams out there. There's obviously the relationship with AC Milan, which exists through Redbird owning AC Milan, and also they own 11% of FSG. I think some of it is coincidental. It's wasn't. I don't think it was arranged as some kind of tout for business or for sales of the club prior. I think it's a destination. It's a popular destination. There will be an element of commercial opportunity which is presented by going to Dubai at this time. This time of year, and also it's kind of, I suppose it chimes with the theme of the World Cup being in the Middle East anyway. So I think there will be undoubtedly an element of commercial benefit, maybe, whether it's through streaming games, whether it's through sponsorship of tournaments, or whether it's through often you get short-term sponsorship deals, linked to the specific clubs throughout kind of pre-season tournaments, and it's probably treated something like that. It's kind of like a scaled back, almost like a pre-season tournament, but in the mid-season. So there'll be opportunity, I'm sure. How much, how valuable and how lucrative that will be. But obviously, because of the week that's been, the focus is on, is there something more to a trip there? I just don't think there is. I think it's purely coincidental.
I mean, maybe not on the ownership side then, but we've seen before Liverpool playing friendlies, obviously against the Red Bull clubs. 2 clubs they seem to be pretty friendly with, I'm going to say. They've done business with them both ways. Do you think there could be any potential business in terms of the transfer market to be done with Milan and Lyon?
I think Liverpool's needs for January are quite obvious, aren't they? They need or if they can get a deal done for a major midfielder in January, that's what they will try and do. But if they have to wait to the summer, that's where it will be. I think they will have their targets in mind prior to them heading out. I think there's probably been a list pinned on the wall of Julian Ward's office for some time, which has names on it which we'd expect. One of them at the top, I'm sure, being Jude Bellingham. But whether these things transpire and they work out, I mean, it's who knows? It's going to be a major asking price for anyone like Bellingham. And also January will, if you're going for players in January, it usually means you're going to have to play a slightly inflated sum, because clubs don't want to part with players mid-season, especially if they're going for honours themselves, if they're in a title chase or they're in a chase for European spots. Sometimes it is more financially beneficial to hold on to these players a little bit longer and secure that kind of Champions League qualification than it is to simply sell them and make a quick profit, because they'll be able to sell these guys in the summer anyway. But so no, I don't think. I mean, I suppose that who's on the radar for Liverpool and sign them is not. It's not really my wheelhouse, but I would expect that they have an idea of what they're going to do. Whether it's, you never know, that there might be players that they see during this pre-season tournament that pique their interest. There might be conversations had which might solve a short-term problem for Liverpool. Obviously, probably the biggest name there who is a Liverpool player is kind of Rafael Leao, isn't it? That everyone will be wondering what's happening with him and his AC Milan future. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of Liverpool fans that would love to see him at Liverpool, but I don't think their needs lie in that particular area of the field at present. I think they've got a very glaring need to address midfield issues if they're going to push on and try and get a Champions League spot, which after the last week or week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever, seems that they go into this camp now with a little bit more of a spring in their step than they did after the Forest and the Leeds defeats. The mood was extremely low. That we usually manifests itself in on Twitter as a lot of kind of FSG out, and then comes the news that they're considering that they may actually be on their way. But I think the mood has slightly changed. I think the tone around Liverpool slightly changed in this past couple of weeks, and they'll be thinking if they can get a positive camp out there in Dubai. Leverage some commercial opportunities and kind of all their players come out fit and healthy from the World Cup. I think they'll feel emboldened to maybe spend some money in January to try and make a concerted effort to ensure that they land a top 4 spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the positivity going into camp is going to be completely different to what it could have been had the Spurs and Southampton results not gone ideally. But we'll leave it there, Dave. Thank you so much for joining me. A brilliant update as per usual on all things FSG. We'll be bringing these to you very often in the coming weeks, I'm sure, as new people are linked, there's new rumours every few days. So we'll be sure to keep you in the loop. And to keep yourselves in the loop, make sure you're subscribed right here on the Blood Red channel. But from myself, Patrick Smith, and from Dave Powell, thank you very much for joining us on The Bottom Line. We'll catch you next time.